If most of your retirement savings is in a 401k or traditional IRA, you could be setting yourself up to pay hundreds of thousands more in taxes than you need to. And I'm going to show you exactly how much using a real couple and the single mistake that cost them $2 million. I'm Zan, and I talk about queer wealth because your financial plan shouldn't assume you're straight. Let's dive in. Here's what we're covering today. First, the tax bomb waiting for you at age 75 and why it hits LGBTQ plus retirees especially hard. Second, the exact income brackets where Roth conversions go from smart to catastrophic. And third, how to avoid the $2 million mistake I see people make all the time. But before we get into that, let me give you some context on why this matters right now in 2025. The tax rates we have today, they're historically low, and they're scheduled to sunset at the end of 2025 unless Congress acts. That means the 22% bracket could jump to 25%. The 24% bracket could become 28%. So the window to do strategic Roth conversions at favorable rates is closing. Real quick, this is based on an actual couple I worked with last month. I changed their names to Alex and Jordan, but the numbers are completely real. So, Alex and Jordan, both in their 50s, specifically 55 and 52. About $1 million in pre-tax retirement accounts. And they asked me the question I hear constantly: should we do Roth conversions? Now, most financial advisors would just say yes and start converting. But here's what they didn't know. The answer isn't yes or no. It's yes, but only in specific years, in specific amounts, and if you screw it up, you'll actually be worse off than doing nothing. Let me say that again because it's critical. You can be worse off doing Roth conversions than doing nothing at all if you do them wrong. And for LGBTQ plus couples, there are some unique wrinkles. Maybe you retired to a more affirming city with higher costs. I see this all the time with couples moving from the South or Midwest to the coasts. Maybe you spent $50,000, $100,000, even $200,000 on family building through IVF, surrogacy, or adoption. Maybe you're dealing with higher healthcare costs because of delayed care earlier in life, or because you put off addressing health issues while you were closeted. All of this changes your tax situation. You might have less saved. You might need more income. You might have different family obligations than the traditional retirement planning assumes. Let me show you what I showed them. Here's their situation in detail. Ages 55 and 52. One kid who's 16. They used a surrogate, which cost them about $150,000 out of pocket. They've got $1 million saved, which sounds like a lot. But here's the problem. It's all pre-tax. Every single dollar is in traditional 401ks and IRAs. No Roth, no brokerage account. When I ran their numbers out to age 75, something really ugly happens. And this is the thing most people don't see coming. Right now, if they retire at 58 like they're planning, they're looking at maybe $215,000 a year in total income. That's their Social Security. Let's say about $60,000 combined, plus withdrawals from their portfolio to cover their spending. They're in the 22% federal tax bracket. Not great, not terrible, pretty manageable. But then, required minimum distributions kick in at age 75. And watch what happens. Year 1 of RMDs, they're forced to take out $103,000. The next year, $115,000. The year after that, $127,000. By the time they're in their early 80s, they could have $300,000 to $400,000 coming in every single year. Now, here's the kicker. They only need about $100,000 to live on comfortably. They've told me this. They don't want to travel more, they don't need a bigger house, they just want to live their life. So, what happens to that extra $200,000 or $300,000? It gets taxed. At their highest marginal bracket, potentially 28%, 32%, even 35%, depending on how high the income goes. And then, what's left over? It just sits there, growing, getting taxed again next year. It's this horrible cycle where they're paying taxes on money they don't even need or want. For our community, where we already earned 90 cents on the dollar over our careers because of the wage gap, this is devastating. You worked your whole life saving less than your straight counterparts, and now you're going to pay more in taxes on it? That's a double hit. Now, there's a way to potentially add $427,000 to their lifetime wealth. That's not a typo. Nearly $500,000 just by being strategic about Roth conversions. But here's what you need to understand first, because this is where everyone messes up. So let me explain how Roth conversions actually work, because I think there's confusion here. When you convert money from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, you're paying taxes on that money now, today, at your current tax rate. But then it grows tax-free forever. And when you take it out in retirement, you pay zero taxes. No RMDs, no forced withdrawals, nothing. So the question becomes, is it worth paying taxes now to avoid taxes later? And the answer depends entirely on your tax bracket now versus your tax bracket later. Here's the strategy most people miss. They hear Roth conversions are good, and they go way too hard, way too fast. I've literally had people come to me after converting $500,000 in 1 year, and I have to tell them, I wish you'd done nothing. You just paid 35% tax on money that would have been taxed at 15% later. You lost. Here's the actual strategy for Alex and Jordan. They're going to retire at 58. That means they have 17 years before RMDs kick in at 75. That's their conversion window. During those years, their income is going to be lower than it was when they were working. Maybe they're just living off savings for the first few years. Maybe they're doing some part-time consulting. The point is, they're not in the 32% or 35% bracket anymore. So what we're going to do is strategically convert just enough each year to fill up to the top of the 22% bracket, which right now is about $190,000 for married filing jointly, without spilling over into the 24% bracket. Let me give you specific numbers. In year 1, maybe they convert $45,000. They're already taking $80,000 from their portfolio to live on, so that puts them at $125,000 total income. Still in the 22% bracket. Year 2, maybe they convert $60,000 because they had less other income that year. Year 3, their kid is out of college and they're spending less, so maybe they can afford to pay taxes on a $70,000 conversion. You see how this works? It's not convert everything as fast as possible. It's be strategic and fill up the bracket you want to be in. And here's why this matters even more for LGBTQ+ couples. If you spent significant money on family building, you might have less saved overall. If one partner took time off work dealing with discrimination, health issues, or transition care, your earning years might have been compressed. Less time accumulating wealth means you have to be even more strategic about tax efficiency in retirement. You don't have excess money to waste on bad tax planning. Let me show you the actual math on this, because this is where it gets real. If Alex and Jordan do nothing, no Roth conversions at all, they'll pay about $1.8 million in taxes over their lifetime, just by being forced to take RMDs and having all that money hit their tax return every year. If they do strategic Roth conversions, filling up to the 22% bracket for 15 years, they'll pay about $1.4 million in taxes over their lifetime. That's a $400,000 savings. Actually, it's $427,000 when you account for the growth on the money they saved. But here's what happens if they go too aggressive. Remember that $2 million loss I mentioned at the beginning? Let me show you exactly how that happens. Let's say Alex and Jordan get impatient. They read somewhere that Roth conversions are amazing, which they can be, and they decide to convert $300,000 a year to get it done faster. Well, $300,000 in conversions plus their other income pushes them way up into the 32% or even 35% bracket. So they're paying 32 to 35% tax now on that conversion. But remember, if they had just left that money alone and taken it as RMDs later, some of it would have been taxed at 12%, some at 22%, very little at 24%, almost none at the higher brackets because they'd be withdrawing it gradually. So they just accelerated a massive tax bill unnecessarily. When I run the numbers, instead of adding $427,000 to their lifetime wealth, they'd have $2.1 million less than if they'd done nothing at all. $2 million. Gone. Because they were too aggressive with their Roth conversions. I see this constantly. Someone watches a YouTube video, not this one obviously, or reads a blog post that says, Roth conversions are always good, and they go do it without understanding the nuances. Roth conversions are good when done strategically. They're disastrous when done blindly. And for our community, We cannot afford to waste money on bad tax strategy. Every dollar you overpay in taxes is a dollar you're not using to actually fund your retirement, support your chosen family, travel to affirming places, or give to LGBTQ plus organizations and causes you care about. Now, let me address some scenarios I get asked about all the time. What if I want to retire at 55 instead of 58? Great question. That gives you even more years to do conversions, which means you can convert smaller amounts each year and still come out ahead. What if tax rates go up? This is actually a great point. If tax rates increase, which they might after 2025, that makes Roth conversions even more valuable, as long as you're not pushing yourself into those higher brackets today. What if I have a pension? Then you have less room for conversions because that pension income is filling up your tax brackets. You might only be able to convert $20,000 or $30,000 a year instead of $60,000. What if I inherit money later? This is where it gets tricky. If you inherit a traditional IRA, you now have to take RMDs on that too, which could push you into higher brackets. This is why planning ahead matters. And here's a scenario specific to LGBTQ plus couples. What if you're supporting aging parents who rejected you, but you've reconciled and now want to help? Or what if you're supporting a chosen family member who doesn't have their own retirement savings? These financial obligations change your spending needs, which changes how much room you have to do Roth conversions and pay the taxes on them. One more thing before I give you the action steps, and this is important. This couple initially told me they wanted to spend $6,000 a month in retirement. Seemed reasonable to them. They'd downsized, paid off their house, kids are grown, but then we actually added everything up. The travel they wanted to do, not just any travel, but trips to affirming destinations where they feel safe. The ongoing support they wanted to give their kid who's looking at expensive graduate programs. Healthcare, which is running them about $1,500 a month even before Medicare kicks in. Maintaining their lifestyle in Seattle, which is expensive but where they have community and feel accepted. Turns out they actually need closer to $7,000 a month, maybe $7,500 some months. So we adjusted the plan. And you know what? That changed the entire conversion strategy. Because if you're spending more each month, you have less cash flow available to pay conversion taxes. The math completely shifts. This is why I don't just hand someone a Roth conversion schedule and call it done. We're constantly pressure testing the plan. What if you retire a year early? What if healthcare costs are higher than expected? What if the market drops 30% right when you retire? What if you live to 95 instead of 85? For LGBTQ plus couples, these aren't abstract scenarios. They're real possibilities we face more often because of systemic inequities, different family dynamics, and sometimes delayed or inadequate healthcare earlier in life. And this brings me to the most important thing, and it's not about Roth conversions at all. Before you ever touch a Roth conversion, you need to know if you even have enough saved to retire in the first place. Because converting money to a Roth doesn't help if you're going to run out of money at age 78. I'll see you there.